IVM.
Storytel is an audiobook platform that's available on your mobile, on your PC, wherever you'd like to listen to this. So what I'm going to recommend this week is a story that I first read when I was in school. It's Kabuliwala by Rabindranath Tagore. I, of course, read this in Hindi. It was part of my Hindi text. The original is in Bengali, but you know what Storytel has? It has an English translation of this story. And it's not just this story. There are a number of Rabindranath Tagore stories that they have. They have The Hungry Stones. They have The Solemn Vision. They have Forsake. Really, really good stuff. So, definitely go check it out. Get a bunch of Rabindranath Tagore books in your first month and go and sign up at storytel.com/IVM and you'll be able to get your first month for just 99 rupees instead of $2.99. That's $200 off your first month. Go, go, go now.
Hi, I'm Zarina Poonawala, your peak performance coach, life coach, emotional intelligence practitioner, and NLP practitioner. I'm also the founder of Abso Expertise Unique, and my organization constantly aims at building leaders across continents. After having worked with so many dynamic business honchos, entrepreneurs, startups, CEOs, management gurus, parents, and student communities worldwide, I am convinced that every individual has unleashed potential, and all we really need to do is realize it. Watch the magic unfold, enhance quality of life, relationships, and professions. On my show, be ready for some riveting conversations with inspirational people, snippets, stories, and much more. So here I am on this exceptional journey to find empowerment and inspiration anywhere I can. Come join me on this breathtaking path of self-realization, potential maximization, positivity, and most of all, embrace your inner power. You are on your way to empowering yourselves. Welcome to the Empowering Series with Zarina Poonawala. On today's episode, I'm in conversation with an explorer with the zeal to conquer every mountain literally, and an entrepreneur par excellence who has conquered the world market with his presence in 85 countries. Please welcome the powerful and persistent Aditya Gupta, founder of the Rug Republic. Hello, Aditya. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Zarina. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely glad to have you and really looking forward to this conversation, Aditya. So how has 2020 been for you? Let's begin with that.
Well, 2020 started with an exciting, bunch of trade shows in Europe, which usually is our case in January and February. And then things began to change somewhere, end of February, beginning of March.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, April, May, June, everybody was in lockdown. So we did a lot of homework. We did a lot of what I call sharpening the saw.
Right.
We didn't really fire any people from the company. We did a lot of trainings and we did a lot of video recordings internally for our processes and things. So that was a good 3-4 months of kind of enhanced productivity for the long term, even though we were shut down for those 3-4 months.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been fortunate that since the world kind of came back to partial normalcy, the business for home fashion items, home decor in general, has actually been on the rise.
That's right.
So as a matter of fact, even though we lost the 3 months completely as far as business itself was concerned, the growth later has actually picked up, and I think we'll probably end the year on a positive note. So the financial year, which ends in March, will be actually a growth year eventually, which is completely a good fortune. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I also feel a little bad thinking or saying about this because I know many people in the world have had a very different run through this pandemic. But we've been fortunate. We did not have any health incidents. I have actually personally had COVID myself.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yes, I was in the hospital for a week.
Oh, okay.
It was mostly precautionary though.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody in our company or anybody that I know really personally, fortunately, God has been really kind.
Fantastic. I hope you're well and good though.
I am. My COVID was in November.
Okay, great. So Aditya, you have so many wonderful facets to your journey, and I've been reading about you, and I absolutely love. There's so much to actually cover with you in terms of understanding what you do, and not only what you do professionally but also personally. So let's deep dive into the Rug Republic and how did this whole sustainable home fashion brand grow and scale from just being a homegrown family brand, a family business. You've converted it into a global entity. How has this journey, how did it begin for you and how did you get here?
So let's put it this way. I finished education, education as in college education. You never really finish education. But I finished engineering at IIT Roorkee and then business school at FMS Delhi. That was in 1992. And then we got into exports. So the Rug Republic as a brand really got born in 2013.
Okay.
But before that, there was already a 23-year-old journey in the business of exports, or let's say a 21-year-old journey starting from 1991. So classically, exporters in India would be dependent on customers' brands, right? So you basically sell to somebody and there is someone else is the gatekeeper between you and the final consumer. So, eventually building a brand is like the holy grail of any manufacturer. And we realize that if we don't have a brand and if we don't have any pricing control, any collection control, then it is a limiting business experience. It's a limiting sort of prospect in various ways. Besides the fact that e-commerce was clearly becoming more and more powerful, and you have to have your own collections and brands and developments directly offered also to the consumer besides a large set of distribution partners.
Right.
So Rug Republic was therefore born out of the sort of evolution from a company which was very strong in manufacturing and supplying to the best brands around the world. And that's the reason we had the confidence to actually create our own collection, invest in a large amount of inventory, invest in the whole branding exercise. We were doing at a time about 14 trade shows across the world.
Wow.
Many in Europe and Asia, and there was our showroom, our export showroom in Delhi has more than 150 international visitors in a year. So we were well positioned to be able to grow this globally. And in order to achieve value addition, in order to achieve a longer term sort of inherent security, because a classic export business can be dependent on a limited number of clients.
Right.
But when you have your own brand and that is also available directly to consumer via internet channels, then you have a multiplicity of sales opportunities. And that is something which is, makes your business very robust. So that's the idea, and it's worked out so well so far.
And since 2013, you've built the Rug Republic in a certain way and you've made it a certain business model. So like you mentioned, it's a business over 20 years and you've gone into scaling it up eventually. Were you always inclined towards the business, or did you have other plans with your life? How did that journey work out for you?
Well, when I finished education, me and my brother were together in business at that time, and both of us worked very hard at this. So we got a great platform. It was a very small business, actually started by our parents in 1983-84 in our family home in Meerut. So by the time we finished education, the business was still small, but there was a learning, there was some bit of a grasp on the sort of nitty-gritties of running a business, on the product, because we literally grew up seeing rugs being made around us.
Right.
Okay, so we had the opportunity to get a very good education. My brother also has a very strong education background. And in 1992, January, was our first trade show in Hanover, Germany. And that was also the first time anybody from our whole clan had ever actually traveled outside of India.
Oh, nice.
So that was an exciting time. And our booth was the smallest one in the trade show. We had a booth which was just 6 square meters big, and we had only 5 rugs to display there. And I went there that year, and I never knew that if I'll go back ever again to Europe. So I was quite excited. I was still in DU. I was doing some classes in German language to be able to sort of, deal with some things in Germany. But eventually that was a start of a lifelong career, as well as a love with the world of home fashion. And I am personally for somebody who's very interested in design and marketing and creating new ideas and new things. And this was about as exciting as a 23-year-old could get, because you were running your own business. This was I won't call it a startup, but it was a very early stage of a business. It was still very small, less than 50 people, less than, I think, 35 lakhs of sales. That was it at that time. But one could directly go out in the world and see the arbitrage of cost and see the potential of Indian handmade product if it is married to modern management systems and contemporary design. So for us, it was an advantage that we were not a traditional rug company based in a traditional rug producing area.
Right.
So we were able to take it always as a home fashion business and not as a rug manufacturing business. And that is what our customers felt very comfortable about. Therefore, we could work with the largest brands and they were very comfortable with us because, they were working with people who were more like business people and sort of modern education and high quality communication, high quality presentation, and obviously the focus on product and service and quality. So our journey in that sense has been very, very blessed. And we were, I think, within 7 years of our starting off, we had the gold trophy for our category of exports. So with people who were in the business for generations in classic areas, we were able to compete and actually sort of go past. So that was exciting. It is, if your own business is doing okay and you are a team of two brothers and there were people and we were setting up factories, growing production in different areas. So it's been a very, very exciting run. And then eventually that business also gave birth to many other ideas and, we built other projects out of the same business. The business continues to be the whole sort of a cash cow of the whole group of businesses, which enables us to try more things, create more ideas. But this remains for me, it's the first love sort of thing. And I absolutely enjoy the process of creativity, the process of, interacting with global brands, visiting the global home fashion stores and the finest trade shows in the world and getting inspired from people who are extremely talented, extremely dedicated to their art. And there is an enormous amount of sort of, I can say learning, I can say inspiration. I get to travel the world initially for work and then eventually, it evolved into traveling just for personal reasons. And every time I travel, it is so inspiring for design, for work, for business, for people. So I think I am really, really lucky and blessed to have sort of got onto this business.
So, Aditya, that is quite fantastic in terms of how not only have you grown the business and having a family business and having your synergy with your sibling, with your brother, and being able to grow the business then. I think that itself is quite interesting. And everything starts small. So, I like the humble beginnings of you actually going for your first trip to Germany and making something like this work, making it big. That's quite interesting itself.
Thank you.
And having said that, I think the Rug Republic is one of those brands which really stands out in the Indian market in home fashion. Everybody who's in the interior or architecture or doing up spaces area or industry, they know the brand. All right. The brand is known to everybody, including me. So how do you manage to stay inspired and how have you managed to create that kind of marketing? You said you like to market and you like communication. What are your, key strategies of being able to market your product or market your brand a certain way?
So the way we look at it is that, it is not, especially our Indian business is only 2% of our international business, and our collections are really geared towards a global market. So then the Indian market also, we have that consumer who is very global in his taste, in her taste. And that is the market that we address in India. And I think that's the reason we catch attention, because if somebody's trying to find things for their homes and they see a certain typology to design and product that is available typically, and then all of a sudden they come across this brand and they find it to be a lot more of what they were looking for, a lot more of what. So our customer is a well-traveled customer, not necessarily very wealthy, because our products are very value for money oriented. So we're not selling very expensive rugs. So we do have a broad target market. The marketing we did initially, we did cover magazines and things, but eventually we realized that the return on investment on the classical, on the standard mediums of advertising was not so valid in our case, because as I said, our sales and domestic market is very limited. So today we do it mostly social media and Google. So digital marketing is the way that I think, and also our target to sell in India is mostly digital.
Right.
So that is aligned out there. And also we had a couple of stores in Delhi. So that gives you a physical presence. So I think a bunch of these mixed things has helped. I would not say that we did something extraordinarily strong or expensive in terms of marketing. But over a period of time, the fact that this space is not overly crowded. So if somebody comes along with a refreshing product and good presentation and reliable quality and service, I think the market tends to recognize and reward that. So in that sense, I think we've been a little fortunate.
That's quite right.
So yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't want to add anything else to it because it's a very slow process. We've done some trade shows. We have some distribution partners and some retailers.
Mm-hmm.
But most of it is today via social media and digital marketing.
Right. We all have our set of challenges, and you probably have had your own. So do you think there are any challenges that typically come with your kind of business or your industry? And if there are, how have you overcome them?
Well, naturally, challenges are what keep us inspired and engaged.
Mm-hmm.
If it's too boring, especially for me, I tend to get into newer projects. And that way, I would say that, as I said, classical export business can get very dependent on a limited number of clients.
Right.
And you had one or two of those exits, and then all of a sudden you feel that, one shot, your business has taken a hit. And this was one of those things that we wanted to create as an inner strength of the business. And then the challenging bit obviously becomes the because you're completely innovation. So basically we are looking at innovation,
right,
not only at the product and design level, but at the business model level.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're trying to introduce a whole new business model to an established, mature market, then naturally it takes a little while for people to kind of take attention, take grasp of that and begin to value it for what it is. But I think if the value proposition is honest and if the communication is clear and the effort is consistent and persistent, the market rewards good work. I have been a believer and I have experienced that in my life that whenever I put my heart and soul into anything and I have, really, really worked hard at something, then I have generally speaking, I have always been rewarded by my effort. And that way my effort and my whole philosophy around this whole thing as an individual is that once I've tried my best and once I've done my very best, I also am quite comfortable with whatever the result is. And if the result is less than what I thought, then I'm not so, hassled by it, so to speak, because I know in my heart of hearts that I've done my best. But if I have not done my best, and if I know in my own heart that I have not done as good as I could have, and then the result is not okay, then I feel quite uneasy about it. Right. Because then I feel like I am responsible for not, getting things done in the best possible way, even though I could have. I'm responsible in both cases, but in one case, I did not know what else I could have done. But in the other case, when I did not put in the best effort that I know I could have put in, then you feel differently about it. So that's how I am built individually. So difficulties, yes, mostly I would say God has been kind enough to say that, there won't be any, huge challenges which would completely blow you out.
Okay.
And partly it is also a question of attitude. So I think like if you present opportunities to people, different people interpret opportunities differently. And I think it's the exact same thing with threats. If you see business threats or individual threats around you, different people perceive and interpret those differently. And I am somehow prone to not looking at things in the most negative possible way or in the most threatening interpretation. And I think that helps me keep a more positive endeavor all the time. And I believe that it's more around us, what we decide to do. It's about our responses more than, what is happening outside in the marketplace. So I think a bunch of these things, and eventually it seems like it's worked out.
That's quite a lesson, actually. So you are an optimist by nature, by personality. And
I think so. If I was not, I would not be doing things like climbing the Everest or something.
Yes, I'm going to come to that as well, because that is something that I'm absolutely fascinated by. I think anybody who knows you would be fascinated by that. That's a story you have to tell us, right?
We'll come to that whenever you want. But making that point that you have to believe, and I think that is something which adventure in general. So for me, adventure, Everest just got more attention because Everest is Everest. But right. I do one serious adventure trip every year, and that's a non-negotiable part of my annual calendar. So like I have to go. And it may not always be as long or as dangerous as the Everest, but it's never very simple either, because otherwise it doesn't give me a challenge, it doesn't give me the thrill that I'm seeking. But adventure actually teaches you to be comfortable with risk. It also teaches you over a period of time that, things tend to look very, very ominous at a certain point, typically at the climax of an adventure trip or a mountain climb or a trek or a river rafting. I've done rafting expeditions down the Zambezi and the Brahmaputra. The Brahmaputra is like the Mount Everest of rafting. And and you fall into rapids of, grade 5, and you get thrown around like a dry leaf in the water. And then you realize after 90 seconds, the rapid actually throws you out. So it just spits you out. And if you can just hold your mind and your balance within those 90 seconds when you're inside the water and you don't know what's going on and you've just been thrown around in the water like you're in the washing machine or something. After 90 seconds, everything is okay. So over a period of time, you begin to realize that things sort themselves out if you don't panic. So when you fall into the rapid or when you are in the typical situation on an ice wall, let's say in the mountains, if you don't panic while things are looking extremely dangerous, if you just don't panic and you keep doing your job, then things also pass. But if you panic, if I'm inside the water in a rapid and I'm going to panic and I'm going to open my mouth or I'm going to do something silly or I'm trying to swim out of it, I'll probably hurt myself or drown. But if I just do what I'm supposed to do and be patient and just do one step at a time and focus at what I can do rather than what can go wrong, eventually it works out. And it is so many of these things have an amazing comparison and parallels to other aspects of life, whether it's business, whether it's personal. Things look very difficult always in a certain phase.
Right.
And I am so much so into believing that if things are not looking difficult enough for you frequently enough, then I would say probably you're underselling yourself and not pushing the envelope of what you can actually achieve. So if you are too secure and if everything tends to be always okay, then that means there is something lacking in what you are even attempting.
That sounds quite about right. And since you've already mentioned the rapids and you've given such a great analogy about, rapids and challenges in life in itself, it's just not about the adventure. It's about how you're dealing and responding to a situation and allowing the time to pass. But at the same time, keeping your patience or, holding yourself or just going and doing your job as it should be done. Do you think that a lot of people do tend to do that? Or do you think that, do you come across people who do that often? Or do you come across people who do the opposite?
Well, there are both kinds in the world. All kinds of people make the world. And I think sometimes it's a healthy thing, because if everybody is going to be the same person, then I don't know how will the world be interesting.
True.
But let's say, for example, on the Mount Everest expedition. Okay, so people land up there and everybody's prepared hard for a year and they paid a serious amount of money, all 100% advance. But, after everybody's at base camp, the first night of the climb over the Khumbu Ice Fall, and the Khumbu Ice Fall is the first part of the Everest expedition right after base camp. And it's a complete 180-degree transformation up to the base camp. It's a very cool, easy trek. It's almost like a party. And all of a sudden, it just transforms from trekking to mountaineering. And that too, a very dangerous nature of mountaineering, because Khumbu Ice Fall is the most dangerous part. First night of the climb over it and back, about 20% of the people return home.
Really?
20% of the people,
wow,
more or less, just decide to not pursue the expedition after, one meeting with Mr. Khumbu Ice Fall. Because what happens is that sometimes people can genuinely fall sick, because the Khumbu Ice Fall then takes you to an altitude about 20,000 feet to Camp 1. And altitude is a merciless sort of adversary. If in case you just fall on the wrong side of it and you haven't done your homework right, then and sometimes you can't really do much about it. It's a physiological response of your body. Sure. But it's also a lot about how you focus and how you look at it. Because if you constantly keep looking at all that can go wrong, then naturally you can be gripped by that whole threat rather than the opportunity. Right. So one of those lessons, I've just finished writing a book called The 7 Lessons from Everest. And one of those lessons, yes, it's just being published now. And one of those lessons is about the power of focus. And the power of focus really refers to what, Everest or other expeditions have taught me, that sometimes you are passing through extremely dangerous spots. There is barely 6 inches of place to put your foot and pass. There is a steep fall to the right and the left. You're crossing ladders over crevices. You're crossing very, very thin ledges and ridges. But if you just focus so sharply on where you can place your foot, and not look at everywhere else that you can fall down or you can hurt yourself, you actually pass through. It's the idea is you don't have to look, even when you're crossing the ladders over the crevasses, you're looking down. But you have to just look at the rung and don't look down into the crevasse, which is 200 meters below. You don't have to look. They just have to look at the crevasse and you will find it be quite okay to put your foot and you can go. But if I look to the left and to the right, then I'm going to be frozen to death, basically. You'll just freeze and you'll panic and you'll just lose your balance. Right. So I think it's a lot about where you focus, and that determines a lot about how you approach the situation. And this is an extremely easy thing to see parallels in life. If you will ever see how you handled a difficult situation and you just play that back in your mind, it will be so much about how you were able to focus on what you can do and how those things can be solved, rather than on things which you can't do or all the things that can potentially go wrong. So that power of focus is a huge advantage if you can do it. And unfortunately, not everybody is equally oriented to that. And most of the challenges and most of the games, including in business and life and adventure and mountaineering or whatever else, is all about your mental aptitude more than your physical ability. So climbing Everest is not so much about your physical strength, really. In fact, most of the very strong physical guys eventually never made it. And
are you serious? That is interesting. That is some kind of information.
That very much is the case. So when you get there, you see all these people who are ultra marathon runners and all kinds of very, very qualified people, and you suddenly feel very ordinary. But eventually, by the time the expedition ends, a lot of those people get filtered out. And ordinary folks like me are still sort of managing to reach the summit. Not because we are something extra special, but it is, I think, the humbleness of expectations and the idea that I have to be fighting this out rather than I can do it easily or I can be very, very much in control. So when the mountain actually begins to slap your face, and if you always come there with an assumption of chest thumping and that I can do anything and I will do it easily sort of thing. So, that was my lesson. You have to acknowledge the risk and fears of something and prepare for it, and be humble in the face of adversity without getting frustrated about why things are going wrong. Why am I getting sick? Why did I fall down? Why did I break my leg? All of those things will happen. But sometimes if there is a lot of confidence and a lot of past history which tells you that you are someone extraordinary, and when that turns out to be not the case, then I think people begin to give up. True. Quite quickly. So I saw that happen a lot at Everest, actually.
And that must have been its own learning for you. I also believe that you did this at the age of 50.
Yes, I did that 2019, and I had just
2019.
2019. I'm 1969 born.
So not that age is a big factor in my opinion, to be honest, but how, especially in our country, by 50 people are planning their retirement. And they're already thinking about what they're going to do after they put their feet up. And here you are trying to tread a mountain all along. So was this always a plan? Was this a bucket list, or did this just happen as it happened?
No, well, I don't think Everest is something which you just decide to go one fine day in the morning. Exactly. But so I have been in the trekking and adventure sort of thing right from college, from IIT Roorkee times. 1987 was my first trek to Pindari Glacier. Then I did my basic course in mountaineering in 1991. Actually, I bunked classes at FMS Delhi because the course is about 28 days long. And there was no chutti at the time of the course, but I had to go. So I bunked for 2-3 weeks to go for this course. And I've been into it because for me, education is a very holistic, it's a very sort of all-round thing. It's not only about what you're learning in books. I would bunk any day. I would let my children bunk any number of classes to go and do this course, because what you learn there, you can never learn in a classroom. And it's not about tying the knots and the equipment and, all those techniques. It's about mental strength. And interestingly, even on the Everest, the average success rate of people who are above 40 years old is actually higher than the younger crowd. That is not so much because their physical strength is higher. It's because the game is mostly mental.
Right.
Physically, you just have to be qualified, like table stakes is okay. Obviously, if you are running a race, that's a different story. But here, you are just sort of trying to get to the summit in good shape and coming back in good shape and safe. So sometimes the ability to handle things in a mature way, you can't fake it. I mean, any large project in life, you can't really fake it, whether it's business, professional success. So you can fake it and you can wing it temporarily. But an expedition like Everest, which is 50 days long, and is the ultimate endurance test of
50,
your
you
mind.
mean 50?
50. 5. It's nearly 2. You have to have 2 months. Kile, you're gone.
Acha, okay.
And you are sleeping in the bloody nylon tents in minus 25.
Okay.
So this is an endurance test which is of the highest degree. And things happen, unpleasant situations happen. Sometimes people fall out. Sometimes you fall. You invariably will have incidents. I mean, I had accidents. All of a sudden, my left leg, we were climbing through the Kumbu ice fall, and my leg went through the ice in the ground into the water below. I was sitting with sort of one leg disappeared into the ground, and whole thing soaked by icy water right into my mountaineering boots. And it's 3:00 in the morning and it's minus 25 outside. And you are now with one leg completely soaked in water. So they pulled me out, but then I had to go back, and there was a full chance of getting frostbites because it was a complete recipe was ready. So I had to go back to camp, 3 hours back to camp, and I could not go ahead, and I had to sort of come back the next day. So the point I'm making, it's a lot about how you are built mentally. And that is something which also comes about either you are a natural at that, okay, then you're very fortunate. But I think over life, people's experiences and the situations that they have faced and overcome give them the belief systems that help them to face new situations.
Sure.
And that belief system can tell you that you will get through it. That belief system can also tell you that you will not get through it. But depending on how you look at the world and yourself. So I read somewhere that the stories you tell yourself about yourself is a big determinant of what you will do and what you will achieve and what you will quit.
It is quite right. I think also the fact that you have this optimistic attitude, and when you say focus as one of the lessons that you've written in your book, like you mentioned, being focus oriented, I think the idea of focus is to be either your focus is on problem solving or problem thinking. And that's how I divide people a lot of times when I meet them, in terms of whether you're a problem solver or a problem thinker, because the thinkers aren't really looking for solutions. They're looking for a problem in the solution. And the ones who are solving the problem, they generally tend to have an attitude and a personality or certain characteristic traits that sound very close to, or in fact quite about the same as you've been mentioning so far, whether it's business or whether it's scaling a mountain.
That's very true. So the exact lesson that I am talking, I mean, the way I've actually articulated it is called the power of focus, or your actions depend on your focus. So, everybody's focused on something, but depending on how and where you're focused, a lot of your actions actually evolve out of that.
True.
Then there are other lessons. So this is the book there are 7 lessons. So this is just one of them. And some of them kind of balance each other out, and some of them are, all sort of an overarching model of thought or a model of, conduct, if I may, which help us to run through. And Everest is not, it's just a metaphor for any other seriously challenging project or something which everybody's voluntarily in Everest. There's nobody forcing anybody to go to Everest, right?
Right.
So you are sort of voluntarily taking on an expedition which is statistically has a number that 1 in 25 people will not come back from there, and about 5 in 25 people will come back with a permanent injury, loss of limb or fingers or whatever else, or nose or something, and about another 10 in 25 will come back with some hospitalization needs. So hardly, I think 10 people out of 25 are the ones who come back kind of unhurt. And this is statistics. This is not something this is not guesswork. There's actual data on this, and you still are going into that, right? So there is a degree of there is an unmistakable degree of lunatic behavior, if I may, that you are there, and one does sometimes say that, okay, what am I doing here? But eventually those days pass, and then it is a transformational experience. Climbing Everest is a transformational experience, as is running a business project. It's just that Everest kind of compresses life into 50 days. Some of those things happen quite the same way in life and in business, but they may happen over 10 years. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we are not able to take that helicopter view of 10 years of a period. So it's said that life has to be lived forwards and understood backwards. But Everest lets you do that over a period of 50 days. It's kind of easy. But if you have to do the same thing over a period of 10 or 20 years, it is sometimes not that simple, or it's too late.
True. I think that's beautifully put. That's beautifully explained, that Everest allows you to do this in 50 days, that you probably will take your own time to figure out eventually. But naturally, not everybody is going to be able to climb metaphorically that Everest as you did, literally rather. How was the feeling of actually conquering and getting to that moment, Aditya, where you felt that it was all worth it? Of course, maybe for somebody as adventurous as you, every step of the way must have been worth it. But, to actually hit that goal, to hit that peak, or to be able to come back down and say that I'm one of those 10 people or the 10% who've been able to conquer it in a certain manner. How was that feeling?
So, firstly, and I've said this multiple times over in various interviews and conversations, phrase that sometimes people tend to use, that you conquered anything, that is completely misplaced. So we don't conquer anything. The Everest lets you climb. Okay, so the Everest, the Sagarmatha decides. It's almost, you can feel it, that it is almost picking and choosing. You will pass, you will not pass. There's nothing wrong with people, or nothing lacking in the people who did not make it. Okay. So I think destiny has a large part to play. Obviously, your approach towards things that happen, it's not like completely luck, but there is an unmistakable luck factor. So there's no conquering business. Everything is completely, you do your job, and Everest says, okay, you guys can go and you guys can go back home. I'll not let you climb to the top. Right. But having said that, you feel very fortunate, and you feel very excited and very enthusiastic and sort of energized when you reach. So the night of the summit climb is, for me, it was a 24 hours of non-stop mountaineering. So 13 hours to the top from camp and 11 hours back. So we left 6:30 in the evening from Camp 4 in the death zone at 8,000 meters. And we reached the summit at 7:30 in the morning. 13 hours non-stop. You cannot stop. The only thing that is keeping you warm is that you are moving, because you are in winds. It's minus 30, minus 35. You are dehydrated, hungry, deprived of sleep, deprived of every single thing. There is no logical explanation for how you are able to walk there. It is entirely your willpower. It is entirely about how you've sort of chosen to do this. There is, everything logical is saying that you should have perished by now. But something is there where you are almost like gliding over it. And you just realize after some time that I'm almost there. So another thing, and this is a lesson that I would like to share with anybody who's interested.
Sure.
Is that there is a period in everything, and similarly on the Everest, similarly in business, and similarly other life projects, that the middle part of an effort sometimes is the most challenging. Because in the beginning, you have the enthusiasm and the energy of a good start. And when you're coming to the end of it and the goal is quite near, then you get very energized because the goal is right there, and now you can't give up and you don't have to. But between the 40 to the 80s, sort of, let's say if it was 100 points to achieve, then after the first 40 points, you begin to realize that there is so much left and I'm already drained out. And you keep on going, and that middle part sometimes becomes the hardest. So once, if in that part you can maintain your balance, and that was my other lesson, which I've called as one step, the power of one step at a time. Not all the time thinking how much is left, but just doing your job about putting one foot ahead of the other, and eventually you get there. But if you're constantly evaluating and you're constantly thinking about how much is left and how will I ever get there, I'm already completely, out of energy. I'm completely drained out. And I've done only 4 hours, another 8 hours to go. Like, you can keep on thinking about these things, and then you'll probably just give up. But if you just talk about talk to yourself about how much you've already covered and not how much you've left. And you keep going. Eventually, the 40 to 80 happens. And once you are above the 80 mark, then you see the sort of goal is nearby, and that energizes you. But between the 40 and 80 is so in the business also, in your career also, sometimes, you get these challenges when you are like 35 years old, between 35 and 45, all of these midlife crises and so many other phrases that we use.
Right.
But you can see that in a 45-day expedition. You can see that in sometimes right in the middle where things are, if they are not going well. And again, I would say if you're doing something challenging enough, they are unlikely to be going well all the time. So yes, that is another thing. So I felt good, but it is also in some ways a little underwhelming because you get there and then you can be there only for a few minutes. So you've climbed for 47, 48 days to a place and you are asking yourself that not even get 1 minute for 1 day of climbing. So typically it's 20 minutes on the summit. I somehow...
That's about it.
That's it, typically, but somehow I exceeded because I'm a photographer and I got so engrossed in taking. So my first picture and my last picture has a gap of 36 minutes. So I realized that I overspent my time on the summit. And that is not advisable for various reasons, because one reason is that your oxygen is running in the tank, and whether or not you're making progress, oxygen is running. And at some point, it's a finite amount of oxygen. And if you run out of that, then you're done.
Right.
And it is a large part of the problem, and people die because of that. And that is, in fact, another lesson out of the 7 is that time is oxygen. That in life, what happens is everybody has a fixed amount of time, like we have fixed amount of oxygen on the Everest. Right. And if you're not making progress, if you're stopping too often, or we're being too slow, then you can go slowly and you can do whatever, but the oxygen in the tank is running.
Mm-hmm.
So similarly in life, time is running. And if you're not making progress, your clock is working.
That's true.
It's not stopping. And at some point, you will run out of oxygen. At some point, you'll run out of time. So that can happen in a 5-day deadline project. It can happen in a 5-year project goal. It can happen also in a 50-year lifespan where you become 50 years and you realize that a lot of stuff was never got done. And it's so much about the micro habits. It's so much about the little things. It's so much about the everyday things. It's not really so much about the huge ideas that you have, It is so much more about the little things that you do and the habits that you inculcate, which let you do those little things on a consistent basis. So Everest climb is the same thing. And in my way of looking at business, our experience of more traditional, conventional businesses, where we feel that we've created our growth or our wealth, if you may, through this what we call the piggy bank model, every week, every month. There was no big valuation event that happened. All of a sudden, you got taken over for 5,000 crores or whatever,
Right.
Worked your life out, and every week and every month and gradually over a period of time, you realize that, okay, there is a certain war chest that you built, and that lets you try more ideas because there is a risk-bearing capacity and there is knowledge. So I think so many parallels between how life actually gets compressed into a short amount of time on an adventure trip. And this is not only about Everest, by the way.
Right.
And even smaller adventures have the same exact phases. Everest just takes it to another level, but the ideas are the same.
That's quite right, actually. That's quite right. So the book that you've written, has it already been, you've said it's being published at this point in time?
So the book is under print. It is
under print?
Which is a photo essay on the Everest expedition. And it's not very word heavy because it's more like a pictorial journey.
Yeah, but the way you're sounding about it, it would be lovely if it was word heavy. I think we'd have a lot of life lessons to
Things about time, about focus, about one step at a time. There's nothing very new about it. But what happens is that when you internalize some concept in the context of an expedition like Everest, then they really become a part of your being. They become a part, like, I've used the phrase brain tattoos, which I picked up from another person who was talking on the internet. I like that phrase, brain tattoos.
Brain tattoos, okay.
How do you get the brain tattoos? Mild experiences don't give you brain tattoos. You're climbing there that night, people are collapsing. They're physically dying, and there are dead bodies from previous expeditions out there. So it is almost like an alarm on snooze. Every half an hour, every 45 minutes, you are kind of reminded where you are and what you are up against. and then you are still going ahead. But eventually, it sort of works out. There has to be that overarching belief that I can do it and I will do it. And at the same time, your self-awareness about a stop-loss decision. If there is a reason, a lot of people get killed because they don't turn around at the right time.
Right.
They push it way beyond they should have pushed it. So it's a mix of being determined to do it, at the same time being sensible about the fact that, the mountain is going to be there. And if somehow today is not the day, then maybe another time. But you can't be arrogant in the face of Everest or even smaller things. So for the projects also, sometimes, like I've had this experience in business projects. I've done ideas, and to a point, you really want to do it and you really want to take it. But at some point, it becomes more sensible to take a stop-loss decision. And especially when you are seeing that you are absolutely, spending your energy, time, money, whatever is the context of the idea, and there has to be certain amount of an inbuilt evaluation or a milestone check. It can't be purely romantic idea. It is good to be romantic and innovative and brave and all of that. But eventually it's said there is a very, very fine line between bravery and stupidity. And sometimes it is very easy to miss those lines. And there are no second chances, not on Mount Everest, not on so many other occasions. If you're doing it wrong, then that's it. The mountain is ruthless.
That's true. So basically, you need to be determined, you need to be persistent, but at the same time, you need to know when you're saturated and when it's time to turn back.
Yes, and there has to be some sort of an objective criteria around it. And, you can always evaluate it, but you have to have a starting point and you have to commit to yourself. And this was a conversation I've had, with mountain experts out there or even my family, that I will not knowingly kill myself. If there is a reason that I should turn around, I will turn around and I'll come back, whether it's on the last day or earlier or whatever happens. But that's why I said, I've seen people turn around. I've seen people not turn around and get killed.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also seen people turn around and maybe they were the wise ones. Because if they didn't turn around, then you can't go with an ego to say, I'll do this, I'll do that. I mean, let it happen, let it unfold and follow certain principles. And I am saying not only with Everest in mind, I am saying these learnings become valid in other contexts also.
They do. Absolutely. So apart from, let's say, like you mentioned, you're not conquering the Everest. That I completely agree to. But do you think in the process you do conquer or face your fears and overcome those, not only challenges, but fears, fears of...
Absolutely. So that is another lesson that you kind of touched upon. That lesson is called make friends with fear.
Okay. So you don't conquer your fear, you make friends with your fear.
Because what does it mean conquer? See, there is no such thing as being fearless.
Mm-hmm.
So either you are lying or you are stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are things to be afraid of, then you have to acknowledge those things and prepare for those things. Okay.
Right.
So if you are fearful enough that you will prepare in a robust manner, then I feel insecurity is a good thing. Certain amount of insecurity is a good thing.
True.
So, I mean, to share with you some examples, I was very concerned about frostbites happening to me on the last day. And I talked to senior mountaineers on base camp and I took some tips and I applied those tips. And I was the only one in our group who did not get a frostbite.
Right. So you prepared for, you anticipated, you
afraid of something. It is good to be fearful of something to the extent that you will be conscious about preparing for it.
Correct.
And not assuming or hoping that this will not happen to you or this will not happen on this day. Well, it may not happen, but what if it does? So you already know about it, but hope is not a strategy.
Agreed. Hope is not a strategy. Okay. Sounds great. So that brings me to our last segment, Aditya. Of course, you've spoken about lessons and you've shared so much with us, but is there any one belief or a few beliefs that you swear by that, you'd like to share with everybody?
Well, I think in my own life, what I have experienced, and there can be so many good things to say and share. Mm-hmm. But if I had to pick one, I would think that there is no shortcut to success. There are no shortcuts. So it is about doing the right thing over and over again. And it is about that consistency and that persistence of effort. And there are no shortcuts to success. So you are not looking for shortcuts. You have to be prepared for the long haul.
Right.
Regardless of what you're trying to achieve. If you're a professional, you're a sports person, you're an arts person, you're a musician, look at anybody, business world, everybody. So I would say that if that belief is there and you stop looking for those shortcuts and you begin to put your head down and get on with it in a sincere way to understand that this is going to take time and effort, and there is no quick fix around it, and there will be so many things. So I would rank that as my number one belief, which helps me to stay on track when things require that I am more persistent. I'm not easily thrown off my objectives. And it applies to everybody. I mean, this applies to everybody. And there are obviously so many, it's not the only thing. But, for the sake of our prioritization, I would pick this as the top thing.
Number one.
Your internal belief system, again, as I said, it will determine a lot of other stuff that you will do.
Right. Definitely. And how about some words of wisdom for our listeners? Something you'd like to impart?
So I think I've been over that already.
No, I mean, I have been listening very interestedly to everything you've had to say. So just to, sum it up.
To kind of repeat the 7 lessons that I have. And I think that covers everything in life. So lesson number 1 that I spoke about, actually I haven't spoken about yet because that was not part of our conversation. The first lesson was passion plus preparation is equal to performance. So it takes both, not only passion. It's a question of what are you able to or willing to sacrifice for your passion. So preparation, consistent preparation, hard work of preparation, and that perspiration, if you like, to support your passions is what, and when the preparation is done and you are in the middle of it, and then your passion, when things go wrong or things look very difficult, then your passion actually carries you through because time to prepare is already over. Now you're in the middle of the match or middle of the expedition or middle of the project or middle of whatever else. Preparation time is over. Now the game is on. So that passion plus preparation is equal to performance is my important lesson number 1. And then lesson number 2 is the power of focus. We already talked about it. And then lesson number 3 is expecting to deal with the unexpected. I didn't talk about it, but essentially it says that everything cannot be predicted. So while you can make friends with fear and while you can prepare for something and while you can focus on the right stuff, but end of the day, you have to expect internally belief that at some points and frequently enough, things will not go as per plan. So if you're already expecting it, even though you did not know what exactly will happen and what exactly will not go per plan, but you knew something will happen and something will not be as per plan. So if you are already with a belief system according to that idea, then when those things go wrong, then you're not panicking. Then you're not frustrated. Then you say, okay, this was the problem. Okay, I was anyway expecting a few things to not happen, right? And this is one of those things. So let's just deal with it. So you kind of work it out and it just happens. And then my next lesson number, whatever it is, 4 or 5, is one step at a time. And we talked about it. So just the power of believing in one step at a time, And then another lesson, which I didn't share yet, and I know that you're probably looking for a shorter answer, but I'm just trying to be more comprehensive because, you can share one belief, but if it's about wisdom, and this is kind of fresh in my mind because of the Everest was only 2019. And that lesson is that scale should not scare you. So if I'm talking about larger things and, bigger ideas, then sometimes Everest is a good metaphor for something which is very, very enormous in scale.
Yes.
The scale of our ideas and the scale of our project should not really scare us, but actually enthuse us. So that was my lesson number 5. And then lesson number 6, as I already shared, is about the fact that time is oxygen, and time is limited in any case. And no matter what you do, things will, at some point, it will run out. At some point, things will run out. So that is a lot of, I think, more wisdom than you wanted. But that's all I wanted to say here.
All right. So those are some wonderful words of wisdom, Aditya. Lastly, I can't let you go without asking you our signature question. What empowers you?
Well, what empowers me again is a bunch of different things, but I think my time close to nature is a very, very forceful thing in my life, and that's why it's such a non-negotiable. The other thing which empowers me, and again, this I say with all humility and love for everybody else, is that the idea of balance in life, okay? The idea of the fact that you feel that you are able to balance most of the things that you wanted to achieve, that empowers me to not feel like this whole idea, for example, of retiring, etc. I mean, why do you want to retire unless you are feeling that you're making certain amount of sacrifices which you don't want to make? So if you feel that you are able to balance your priorities and you are able to do everything that you wanted to do in a certain balance at different phases of life, some things you balance on a daily basis, some things on a weekly, monthly, or yearly basis. So that balance, if I feel that I am in balance, and if I feel if I'm not in balance, that I can kind of, synchronize it or fine tune it and then achieve that balance, that keeps me very, very positive about whatever is happening. So that cuts out the internal dissonance that one may have from his own life or her own life. And eventually, it's about how much at peace are you with yourself. Mm-hmm. If you're not at peace with yourself, you're not going to be at peace with anybody else or anything else. So I think that balance, that internal feeling of balance, even if it's a misplaced feeling because other people may have different views about it. But if you feel that you are by and large in balance, and I find my time with nature and these nature trips and, to all of these very, very remote places, I'm out of connection for weeks at a time. That allows me to get that. It's not so much of a spiritual thing. It's more of a thought process, really.
Right. So it's a balance that creates your willpower, your mental strength, and everything that you can endure.
You're satisfied about what you're doing, and you feel that you don't really need to give up one thing to achieve the other, because that's not really true.
Right.
You can actually balance quite a few things.
Amazing. So that brings us to the end of our conversation, Aditya. Thank you so much. I have to say that what's interesting about this conversation is the amount of lessons you were able to put in a nutshell and share with all the experiences you've had with your life. So all the very best, and may you keep not conquering, but climbing all those mountains. And, as you say, I mean, there's a saying that how do you climb Mount Everest? I think it's just one step at a time, and you are proof of that. So thank you so much.
And at the time was a lesson that we missed.
At the end of it, we also know that one step at a time, for everything counts. So thank you so much, Aditya, and all the best with the Rug Republic, all the best with all the adventures and all the pinnacles that you're going to reach. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Zarina. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
If you liked this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Let me quickly thank our sponsors on the network this week. Storytel, thewholetruthfoods.com, and we have a new sponsor in Syed. Thank you all so much for being part of the network. So, this is Valentine's week, and we have a bunch of stuff for you guys. So I'm going to give you a couple of episodes that you could definitely catch up with. Agla Station, Season 2, Episode 12, Be Our Valentine. Ritasha and Ayushi have a little bit of talk about love and all the rest of the stuff that goes wrong with that. On The Habit Coach, episode 396, Ashton Doctor did an episode which went into the much-debated origins of Valentine's Day. Also, do check out Candid Kannan with Siddharth Kannan featuring Govinda and his wife Sunita Ahuja. He talks to them about amazing 33 years together. But you know what, folks? If you want to hear more about these Valentine's Day things, what I suggest is go to our webpage, ivmpodcast.com/blog. And on the blog, we're going to post a bunch of different playlists that we've created for all the various major services. So if you're feeling in the mood for love, do check that out. You'll definitely enjoy enjoy it. Just a quick note on a few other noteworthy episodes this week. Nankari Kunal Vijayakar was the guest. They spoke about street food with him. On Simplified, they talk about vaccinating 1 billion people, then the logistical and administrative task in front of us. And on the Wire Talks, Siddharth talks to Devdutt Mukhopadhyay about the human cost of internet shutdowns. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Feeling overwhelmed, anxious, struggling with too many obstacles, don't know where your life is headed? Well, if you are dealing with one or all of these, tune into the Positively Unlimited podcast, because in each episode, I share a life lesson, a life hack, a pro tip that can help you get your life back on track. All episodes are available on the IVM website, IVM Podcast app, or wherever it is that you get your podcast from.